Welcome everyone to the latest Telemedia vodcast with me, Jarvis Todd, the publisher of Telemedia magazine, and the real expert up there, Paul Skeldon, editor-in-chief and long-time Telemedia commentator. This is where we take a quick 5-minute run through of a couple of the really interesting stories that have come across the news desk this week. And no surprise, really, we're going to be talking about payments, more specifically as we see more and more acquirers turning to a range of other payment solutions beyond DCB. Credit card has become a hot topic in the telemedia industry. We, in a previous podcast or vodcast, talked about the Visa VAMP system, so you can reference that if you like. And we're going to talk about that again in a minute, but we're going to talk about it in conjunction with a couple of other stories. The one that's probably not going to surprise you, that Mastercard have now followed suit in some ways with their scam system, and it's very important for acquirers to understand the implications of this because boy oh boy does it make life a little bit more complicated. The story in Telemedia magazine reads Mastercard scam 72-hour intervention window, and the kind of summary is basically there's a 72-hour clock on suspicious merchant activity, focusing on early detection of fraud, manipulation, refunds, and chargebacks. And the really important part for you guys to understand is there's a shift from reactive cleanup to proactive intervention. And I think that's kind of the key, really, to this. So tell us about Mastercard's new rules, Paul, and why people should be taking this quite so seriously.
Well, absolutely. I mean, as you said, we discussed Visa's VAMP rules where they've changed sort of how they want merchants and acquirers to react to suspicious activity and fraud. The emphasis is sort of shifting a bit more towards the merchants and acquirers rather than the credit card companies. Mastercard have kind of followed suit. They're doing something different, but to tackle the same problem that where they're looking at speeding up intervention where sort of any kind of online merchant shows signs of fraud, manipulation, excessive refunds, rising chargebacks, that kind of thing. I think the owners, the impetus for this is they're looking at trying to head off where sort of fraudulent AI payments and fake merchants might be dipping in and placing orders and sort of, then making chargebacks and taking money. But I think it has a much broader impact on anybody who is backing any sort of service that's paid for by cards. Now, MasterCard is essentially from the 24th of July, so in what's that, a couple of weeks' time, introducing this setup. And the 72-hour thing mentioned in the headline is that merchants now have 72 hours to deal with issues that are flagged as being sort of a bit dodgy looking. Now, it's not clear this stage whether what Mastercard deems to look funny has changed. I suspect it might also involve that. But really, it's this idea that merchants and acquirers, once they've been sort of notified by Mastercard, which I think is monitoring most of this using sort of AI, that there's like excessive chargebacks or there's some sort of, some unusual behavior and warning signs appearing. They have 72 hours to investigate it and act, i.e. shut it down or, I guess get them to start behaving themselves if they're legitimate merchants.
Can I just ask, so
Yeah,
there's no, whereas with VAMP, which we covered, as I said, a few weeks ago, there was a very specific kind of ratio or equation, a number that was sort of absolute with regards to them sort of triggering shutdowns and things like that. So Mastercard have not been clear in that respect.
not as clear, no. It's for the information I could find on this when we wrote the story last week was that if approval ratings drop significantly or fall below 30% over a 72-hour period, they then have 72 hours to act to once they've been alerted to those sort of strange behaviors to look into it and to act. I think reading what they actually say, Mastercard defines new merchants as those with less than 6 months of Mastercard transactions processing history and more than 500 transactions a month. If more than 5% of purchases resulting in refunds and chargebacks over a 30-day period will trigger scrutiny.
Oh, right. So there is some
There's a
detail.
whole raft of detail. It's as you can probably expect, there's a vast sort of amount of detail in there on Mastercard's website as to what all this is. And I think sort of it depends on where you sit in the value chain, what kind of merchant and inquiry are. But essentially, they will monitor, and if they think there's something funny going on, they will alert you, and you have 72 hours to react to that
Yeah.
in
So to
some way.
summarize, if you've got messy traffic and unclear
Yeah.
journeys, they're not going to tolerate that.
No, absolutely, and I think sort of if anyone, like I say, it's aimed at primarily tackling fake companies that are set up and use AI to buy things and then charge, to ask for a refund, charge back.
Which, in general, we should be quite happy about. And
Yeah.
interestingly, an awful lot of companies that and clients and sponsors at that attend our telemedia events. The next one, by the way, Marbella, 4th to the 6th of October. A lot of the emphasis is on, we can make a lot of money out of clean traffic. It's not about trying to obstruct bad business necessarily, but if we can take bad actors out of the telemedia industry, that is something that should be broadly supported. And, the theme throughout, I suppose, the last sort of 5 or even 10 years has really been that, compliance needs to be tightened. And this is an area that we celebrate with the likes of Avena and MCP and Palo and all the others. So, yeah, I mean, I think I opened the last thing by saying who'd be an acquirer now. It's getting so complicated,
Mm.
but at the same time, if you, I suppose what you don't want is for these triggers to be too sensitive, where legitimate problems become or are seen as being, potential fraud or potentially issues that require, where
Yeah.
they'll trigger a shutdown when it really wasn't necessary. And I suppose that's the biggest fear. Um,
I think, yeah, that's exactly the sort of, I think the biggest point here. I think more and more sort of cards are being used to pay for sort of what are telemedia services. I think the large proportion of it is all perfectly legitimate. What's unusual with the telemedia sector is I think you do get quite a lot of people who pay for it and then regret it. And so you could inadvertently find that you're doing nothing wrong, but you're getting a lot of chargebacks, and suddenly Mastercard's going, "Whoa, you've got 72 hours to sort this out."
mm,
It's that kind of thing because everyone is trying to be much more compliant. They, as you say, get help from the likes of Avena and Impello and MCP, but it's, I think, much more reactive now, and they have a really short time frame, particularly with Mastercard. So I think
yeah.
it all comes back to sort of how they how they describe their services, how the billing descriptors are really clear, how they have very clean and clear subscription journeys, clear pricing. So all of the things that could possibly make someone think, "Oh, whoa, this is not what I thought I'd signed up for," and ask for a chargeback, you minimize that because that's what like will be flagged up by Mastercard, and suddenly you find yourself having to really react to that, which
And of
could,
course,
yeah,
I
could be
mean,
difficult.
this is not just targeting the telemedia industry. I mean, this whole
No,
issue,
no,
this
it's
whole issue of
universal.
subscriptions is a big one for consumers. I can't remember the stats, but the number of people that are wandering around unwittingly subscribing to services that they completely forgotten about is vast, right? Um,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah. It's huge.
as I pointed out earlier, well, as we pointed out earlier, it's not just Mastercard, because I think it's probably worth touching on the Visa story again, just to put it in context. And the story again that you can read on telemediamagazine.com was that VAMP has introduced, as we mentioned, stricter fraud and dispute controls. So there's a complete overhaul of the system, and the summary basically is stricter fraud ratios and early detection, growing compliance pressures on certainly on telemedia firms, but as we've said, I think it's wider reaching than that. And this is again designed to catch risky behaviour much earlier than has been done in the past. So, yeah, I mean, put the VAMP thing together with the scam thing.
Well, I think the thing that they're tackling it in slightly different ways. I mean, you can read the story. The link will appear below into how Visa VAMP works, but it's all done on a sort of on a ratio of sort of declined and failed and chargeback payments a ratio of that against sort of the amount of revenue you're generating, it's sort of 1.5% or thereabouts. It does fluctuate depending on sort of what the sort of turnover is and that kind of thing. But it's around, it's a 1 to 2 sort of percent threshold, which doesn't sound like much, but I think it's quite easy to suddenly find yourself if you've like mislabeled something that you've got sort of 2% of chargebacks
Yeah.
suddenly. And I think what it means is that sort of anyone selling stuff backed by credit card payment has to be alert to what the chargeback ratios are, what the decline payment sort of levels are, all those kind of things. They've got to be on top of it all the time. There will be fraud, there will be chargebacks, there will be refunds, there will be declines. There will, of course, be scams that consumers will use AI to try and scam like any e-commerce business. You
Wouldn't it have
just
been easier if they decided to get together and maybe have a consistent approach?
I think possibly it might have been, yes. That's probably more of a sort of story for the kind of finance world as to why that doesn't happen. Certainly worth looking further into. But yes, I think it's two lots of added complexity, and the sort of implication is that a lot of the responsibility is pushed back onto the merchant acquirers,
Mm.
such as
And
our
again, I mean,
clients.
the same messages before. I mean, it does put even more onus on telemedia companies to really operate in an area with much cleaner traffic, and again, the sort of orchestration of this to
Mm,
maintain approval rates is important. And as mentioned before, the companies that will help you do that and help you integrate all the different payment mechanisms together into your dashboard will be in Marbella on the 4th to the 6th of October. And I think initially Solaris Pay and Next Gen Payments, who are both sponsoring quite important conference sessions, which will help put this
absolutely.
into sort of commercial perspective for the attendees at that particular event.
Yeah.
Anything you'd like to add to that, mate?
Well, I was just going to say the one upshot of this is that it makes it will probably increase interest in things like wallets and account to account and click to pay payments and those sorts of things because it might, the more of those you're going to have, the less of this you have to worry about potentially. So as we discussed in the previous podcast, yeah, those sort of things are rising. This could well help those and DCB become, might increase their volume of payments traffic. But that's probably a thing for another podcast
Indeed.
in the future.
Well, let's wrap it up there. As I say, if you want to read these stories and other payment content, marketing, techie, telemedia stuff, please go to telemediamagazine.com and you can see what Paul does with his days. All right, for now, Paul, thanks very much for that. I hope that was useful to everyone, and we'll see you on the next podcast.
Absolutely. Take care. Bye bye.